Hi, this is Fatal Seduction, Season 1, Episode 6, Can. The scene opens up and it says 23 years ago. And it shows Jacob, like probably like around 6, 8 months old, and Lucinda. And Lucinda is giving baby Jacob a bath and she just looks out of it. And then next thing you know, she holds Jacob, baby Jacob, in the water trying to drown him. So the scene leaves off to where Vio and Nandy were talking. And Nandy tells Vio, hey, he left the suitcase, he brought it back, it hasn't been tampered with. And he goes, shit, he knows. And then he goes, no, he doesn't know. I accidentally left the briefcase in class and he brought it back. And Jacob is talking to Leo and they're just talking about how Leo was telling his dad he needed new shoes for university and all this stuff to Jacob. So Fire goes, try to get him out of your house. And she goes, I think of something to make up. And then Jacob goes, I better get going, and Leo goes, nonsense. Join me and your professor for dinner. And then Nandy clicks the phone. Okay, so the scene shifts and Jacob is walking towards Nandy, all creepy. And Nandy is backing up and she's grabbing a knife out of the sink. And he goes, I don't know why you're grabbing a knife. And he grab her hand. And he goes, you love me. You told me you love me. I love you. Where's all this coming from? And then the scene shifts, and then Leo's upstairs with Zenhel, and Zenhel is writing some type of journal. And then he's like, your mom's student is downstairs. Maybe you should come and join us for dinner. He's your age. Maybe you'll like him. And Zenhel was like, hey, no, not you pimping me out. I don't want to go down there. And then he was like, come on, just come downstairs. And she was like, okay. And he was like, just dress nice. And then so it goes back to Nandy and Jacob. And Nandy was like, get out of my house. And Jacob was like, your husband told me to join you for dinner. So Nandy was like, now you follow me from no, she says, I don't see anything wrong with that. But you're following me on my anniversary and now you're here. And then Leo is walking down the stairs and he's like, Nandi. So Nandi tells Jacob, if you love me, you'll leave me alone. Understand? And then Leo was like, is everything okay in here? And Nandi was like, yeah, my student was just telling me that my slides were wrong. And Jacob was like, I didn't say it was wrong. It's just, about catfishing and how people change their names on social media to get away from abusive exes. And Leo was like, oh, you argue over law. And Jacob just like bows his head because and then Leo goes, "Oh no, that's a good thing." And uh, Jacob was like, "Hey, can I be excused from dinner? I excused from dinner. I need to go be fresh for this interview tomorrow." And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." And then he was like, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." And uh, just prepare for the interview. So she was like, honey. And Leo goes, honey, you haven't called me that in years. And, Leo was like, that boy of yours is such a lucky charm for me. And then Zenhale comes downstairs and was like, well, where's this magical boy that you want me to be a bride of? So Leo was like, isn't it weird that you're spending so much time with Laura? And she goes, it's 2023, Dad. Everything is weird. He goes, it's not 2023 in my house. And then they start giggling. So the scene shifts, and Andy is texting somebody over the phone. He is still awake. I will come as soon as I can. Can you please wait? So Leo gets in the bed and he's like, can you read another time? He starts kissing on her. And Nandy is just not feeling it. And then she's like, I'm not in the mood. you know. He's like, I'll put you in the mood. And they just start kissing. And she's just like, no, please don't do it. Not tonight. So Leo asks, hey, what's in that briefcase of yours? Because you jumped when the boy came inside the door. What's in that briefcase? And Andy was like, oh, it's nothing. I just got startled because of a student just barging in my house. And he's just looking at her, and he was like, oh, what's it going to take for this man to go to sleep? So she's like, I've been kind of rough earlier. Let me make it up to you. So she starts kissing on his neck, rubbing on his chest. And then she puts her hands down there. And then he starts to moan. And then they they do the do. So she texts Viol, I'm on my way down. I hope you're still waiting. So she gets in Viol's car. And then the scene shifts. The nurse was like, Jacob, hurry up, hurry up. Your mom, she's running a fever. And Jacob was like, don't call the hospital. Run the ice bath. And the nurse was like, let me help you. He goes, get the bath. And then Lucinda is like banging on Jacob. And she was like, Jacob, Jacob. And then the scene shifts back to Viol and Nandi. And he was like, your little boyfriend. And they're like, don't call him that. And then he was like, so the dick you're currently riding. He was like, what? You're fucking a student. You think I'm going to take it easy on you? And she's like, you keep speaking like that. And they're talking in their native language. And he says Jacob came back 3 hours later and he's showing Nandy the video footage of Jacob coming out the house. And that belt, he said it was used to kill Brenda. And he said Brenda's statement sent Jacob's father to the to prison. And Nandy was like, that was the reason why Brenda recognized him. So he was like, that little prick, he's actually gonna go get away with it. And Nandy was like, well, if he no, he went to go back and kill Brenda, he probably managed to convince her to kill himself. So the scene shifts and Jacob is in the house talking to Brenda. And so Brenda is screaming and Jacob has her like by the throat, by the mouth. And Vanya was like, he's strong enough to subdue her. And so it shows where he put Brenda in the bathtub, but she's still cautious. And this is what Vio is telling Natty. And then he puts the belt around Brenda's little forearm, and then he cuts her with a rollerblade. And then Nandy was like, "No, no, no, man, you could turn it to a suicide, into a perfect murder." And then Violet was like, "Who's this? The lawyer professor? You must fuck that man." And she's like calling her a slut. Oh my gosh. And then Nandy was like, "What did you say?" And, oh, damn. Gosh. And then she's like, "This is about you fucking a student." And Nandy's like, "You're jealous. You're still jealous to this day." And he goes, "I'm over you. I've been long over you. And I'm trying to reopen the case. In order to get this case reopened, tell Leonard what's going on." She goes, "I fucked a student. I fucked a 24-year-old, and I liked that." Oh, 24. God. God, you guys. She's like, "It's so hard." And then she's like, "For the first time, it it felt good." Wow. So Nandi was like, "Well, if anyone's gonna tell Leo, it's gonna be me. Because if I wanna fuck up my life, I'm gonna fuck it off." And he was like, "Nandi," and she was like, "It's just a theory. It's just a crazy theory." And he was like, "Nandi," and she's like, "Fuck off and grow up, Bio." So the scene shifts, and Jacob is in the interview, and he asks him, "Have you experienced real injustice?" And Leo was like, "Try growing up in Kardesh in the 1980s." And then there's a flashback. Jacob is having flashbacks of his mother Lucinda in the bath, and she's just like, "No, no, no." Jacob is like holding her. And then he goes, "After my father was murdered, you know, he said his mother went insane." So the scene shifts, and then Hell is on her phone looking at the video she filmed the other day. And Laura comes and hugs her from behind and was like, "Hey, what's up?" And she was like, "Who are you waiting for?" And then Hell was like, "Who do you think I'm waiting for?" And then she goes like, "What happened yesterday? Did you manage to track him down?" She said the GPS took me to some mechanic shop, but I had no idea what I was talking about. And she goes, "It wasn't him." Laura said that. And she said the mechanic's not a student. And then Zen Hell was like, "Oh, he was hot as shit. I really like him." And then Laura was like, "Name of the place." And she goes, "TAU Auto Shop." So Laura is like on her phone, and she says, "I'm built different," because she was doing something. And then she said, "I have seen this guy on campus." And she goes, "Yeah, look, what did he say?" And then C was like, "Oh, he said nothing. We didn't talk for long. He just rapped about some star signs." I'm like, "In a flirty way," Laura said. And Z was like, "No." I'm like, "I don't know." And then Laura's like, "The whole thing with Pokeboy, whatever the fuck, Pokemon, it's a red flag central." And then Laura was like, "You need to get away. Stay out. And I hope he's not some type of psycho." And Sinhel's like, "Oh God, here she goes." And then they just like hug. So cute. So the scene shifts back to Jacob and Leo was like, "Yeah, the injustice, me and my brother. And I went for this job because I want to get justice for the common man." And then he goes and he pours liquor for him and Jacob. And he was like, "While you're getting justice, you can make some damn good money." And Jacob was like, "Yeah, I know what you're saying." And then he goes, "My father will be proud to see me working in an office like this." So the scene shifts, and we are at Brenda's house, and Nandy's car is parked in front of it. And Nandy is walking on the beach, flashback, with her and Brenda in the pool, talking about, Leo, and does she love him? Have they had sex? Do you really love him? Do you believe in love? And then Vio pulls up and he sees Nandy's car. So Vio's lipping his ass over there to Nandy, and then the scene shifts. Jacob runs, is like running to class, and then he sees a lady teaching the class. So now the scene shifts, and we're back to Vio and Nandy, and they're talking about Jacob and Brenda, and how telling Leo isn't going to make things right. I'm going to have to go in on this case. She was like, Nandy was like, why do you always have to do things? Why can't you just let your friend open the case? Vio was like, if I let him open up the case, Jacob gets what he wants and he wins. And then Nandy's phone dings and it's Jacob. And he's like, what? And then Vio was like, what did he say? He says, I can't wait anymore. I love you. I need to tell you who I am. Fire was like, Nandy, give me your phone. I promise you, all this will blow over and everyone will be safe. So Nandy gets Fire the phone. So the scene shifts, and we're at the shop with Jacob. Jacob is putting on a glove and he's talking about you and her, same time. And then Zenhel, she comes in and she's like, you talking to yourself? And he goes, what? Jacob goes, what? And Zenhel goes, are you sure you're not Pokey Boy? And Jacob goes, oh my God, not this again. And he goes, did the GPS lead you here again? And Zenhel goes, no, your phone. His phone's been off since yesterday. And he goes, if I know Pokey Boy, I would have told you I was. And then she goes, well, since Pokeboy has been mizing me, do you want to go out for coffee or something sometime? No, coffee or something. And he was like, I, I can't, you know, I can't. And then so she was like, okay, well, I'm going to leave. And he was like, but I have a very important appointment that I cannot miss. I have your number. I'll call you, maybe. And she goes, for real? And he's like, yeah. And then she goes off smiling. So the scene shifts, and Leo is at home, and in his native language, he says, hello. And then he goes, oh, hello. And he was like, oh, did you have lectures today? I thought you didn't. That's why I came home early. And she was like, no, I was at the library doing some research. And he's like, did I make myself clear that I want to spend more time with the family? And Andy was like, you know what? And then he just like humps his shoulders. And then Andy was like, I got to tell you something. And then he was like, oh, you got to tell me something, but you can't be sabbatical with me. And then she hears Vio's voice, like, don't do anything that you will regret. You and Leo have a daughter together. So Nandi leaves again after she'd only been home for 5 minutes. And then the scene shifts. Jacob arrives at some type of house or whatever. And then he sees a car that says Jacob Strawberries and Wine. And then Bio just comes behind him and wham with the bat to the back of his left knee. And then he punches him in the face with the bat and just hammering him with the bat in the face. And then he takes Jacob into the bathroom, plunges his head into the tub and says, say hi to Brenda for me. And just like keeping him down in the water, and Jacob's having flashbacks of his mom trying to drown him, and then Jacob just plays dead, like just dead. And then Vio walks off, and that is the end of the episode. And I'll see you in the next one.